This episode is sponsored by Evolve Bootcamp, my outdoor functional fitness program that delivers a sense of warmth, friendliness, and spirit, along with butt-kicking, hellishly fun-filled workouts that embody a caring attitude, evoking the idea everybody that exercises outside has no boundaries and naturally evolves. Class begins at 6 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, winter, spring, summer, and fall. Mention this podcast and come by for a trial class at the Boston Common if you dare. Welcome to the Evolve WMMA podcast featuring the greatest upcoming female fighters on the planet. These women have gone against conventional thinking to pursue their dreams. These fighters inspire, empower, and unleash excellence within a new generation of female fighters as they rise and evolve into the best possible version of themselves through the power of mixed martial arts. Hey, this is Evolve WMMA, and I'm your host, Shelley Devine. So I'm really excited to share with you all. It seemed like a last minute thing. I know for me, it was a last minute thing to find out about. Well, Invicta FC 54 is coming here to Boston, my hometown. So some of you folks may have been following mixed martial arts or MMA since it began with the Gracies some 20 years ago. I know we have a huge following here in the Boston area and in New England. And you've watched its evolution from being perceived as cockfighting to a blood sport to becoming an actual recognized global sport. And some of you may even remember, when Dana White came onto this scene and started the Ultimate Fighter show. And years later, he swore that women would never enter the cage. Well, I think when he stated that, it was some 11 years ago. And since then, Invicta FC began, thanks to the progressive vision of Shannon Knapp. And today we see more women making a career in sports, and we're here to stay. So having Invicta come to Boston is yet another milestone in the journey of mixed martial arts. I mean, geez, it took 11 years for them to actually have a live show in Boston on October 27th at the House of Blues. It's the first time here in Boston, and I'm thrilled and excited to see this happen and hope it will inspire more young girls and boys too. But I'm for the girls. I'm rooting for the girls and female athletes. And I'm so honored to have the opportunity to speak with some of these fighters. And this show, as well as several ones that I'm going to be pushing out this week for your enjoyment to listen to and catch up with some of the new fighters that have come onto the scene. I would say it's like the next generation. So my next guest is from Dublin, Ireland. She fights out of the Straight Blast gym there. And she will be facing Kristina Warhorse Williams. And one of the interesting things about her right off the bat was all her life, she wanted to become a fighter. She wanted to do it to make a living. But she thought in the beginning it was crazy. Well, here she is now. I'd like to welcome to the show Dee Begley. She's the new Invicta FC flyweight fighter. Welcome.
I am. This will be my Invicta debut this Friday coming in Boston. So I'm very excited. And what better place to do it than, Boston, which, holds very strong roots with the Irish people.
Not the last time I've been to a show, but Ireland really reminds me of, I think, when Conor McGregor came to Boston, and he was kind of not really like known, but some people knew him, and we were like, yeah, go Conor. And it was a big deal here because it was, I think, the first time even the UFC had come to Boston. And that was around, I think it was like around 2011 or 10 or something like that. And Invicta started in 2012, So my thinking is you were probably like a teenager when all this was going on. And I'm an old lady now, but like you were a teenager when all this was going on. And now you're like, you know, a grown woman, you're a female fighter.
Yes.
And now you're coming to Boston. And
Yeah.
it's the first show of Invicta FC to make it up here in New England, with a whole female card. And I'm flabbergasted because I didn't know about it. And just recently, and literally like last night, I'm texting all the fighters on that card, can you come onto the show? And here you are. So I'm really thrilled to have you here today. And I want to learn everything possible in a 45-minute stint about you. So go.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, and I think you're doing amazing work just promoting, like, women's MMA in general.
Thank you.
So a bit about me, I suppose. Like, I'm from a very a small enough town in the most southern part of Ireland. So it's not like, a hub for martial arts by any means. Well, you wouldn't think it was, but I had there's a kickboxing club down there. I did a lot of sports growing up. My mom was very athletic in her youth, and she wanted the same for us, because just where we were, it was quite rural. There wasn't very much to do. So my mom threw us into gymnastics from a really young age. We were 4 and 5 starting. And then, it kind of just progressed from there. We did athletics. We played Gaelic football. I played rugby, basketball, all these other sports. And
all right, I gotta stop you there for a second. What's Gaelic football?
Gaelic football is like a traditional Irish sport. So it's similar. I don't know, like, what is it similar to? It's like, say, like soccer, but you pick the ball up. So you can pick the ball up and you kick it between posts.
Okay, so maybe like
hurling is another. Yeah, kind of like Aussie rules, similar but different shaped ball. And then hurling would be the most traditional. It's actually one of the oldest sports in the world, hurling. So it's a wooden stick made out of traditionally ash. And you hit a slitter and through post. There's actually a great story about hurling, kind of Finn McCool and Irish mythology. That's how old it is and how far it goes back to. So it's a great story if anyone's interested in some Irish mythology. So I had a very early, I was always very sporty, loved sports, but I wanted to do everything. Sure. So I did. I eventually did everything, like all different sports, and I was doing maybe like 5 or 6 sports. And at the age of 15 and 16, my parents were kind of like, look, you're at like a really good level at all of these, but you kind of need to pick one. And I had, by chance, just like from the age of 8, found kickboxing. We were doing athletics, and the weather was pretty much like the way it is now over in Ireland, lashing rain, so you couldn't train outdoors, and pitches were waterlogged, flooded. So we were indoors, and my mom was late picking me up. So I saw them kickboxing, and I was infatuated by it. I actually can't. I know I was 8, but I actually can't tell you what really grabbed me about the sport. I was just so fascinated by it. And, there was another girl training, like it was all men, don't get me wrong, there was loads of guys.
Right. I mean, yeah, especially.
Yeah, but there was, and she was class, and she's actually a good friend of mine now as well. We did kickboxing together for years. So long story short, I chose kickboxing out of all the sports. I just had this love for it, like none of the other ones, this passion. And I just never, subconsciously, I never let anything get in the way of my kickboxing. Like there'd be discos down home when you're a teenager on Friday evenings. And I'd no interest in going. Because I had training on a Saturday morning, and I was more excited about that. So I was just always very much drawn to kickboxing. It wasn't something I ever really had to make a conscious decision about.
To go.
Don't get me wrong, there were times, because I've had like a 20-year long like career now at this stage in martial arts. So it goes without saying that there have been like sacrifices over the last 20 years,
Definitely.
you
Yeah.
know, when it came to, you know, maybe like summer holidays, you know, I didn't really have the luxury of like it wasn't like my parents were overly wealthy. They gave us what we could. So instead of us going on a family holiday, you know, they'd, you know, save up money and send me away to go to the World Championships, and they'd do
Mhm.
the same. Eventually, my brother and sister also joined the kickboxing, and it became a bit of a family affair, and it's just something that like my childhood was consumed by it. You know, my weekends were taken
Mhm.
traveling up to Dublin, which is 4.5 hours away from
Wow.
my hometown. So we would travel up at weekends to Dublin, and it's kind of ironic, you know, in my adult life, you know, then it became like I'm now living in Dublin, but I was at one point commuting back to Cork City. So it's funny how life comes in kind of circles that way, but I definitely wouldn't change it. And you know, so kickboxing gave me that base in martial arts, and I was doing that, you know, internationally. I represented Ireland in the
Mhm.
world and European championships, and you know, I then went to college, and there was less maybe opportunities for the kickboxing there. And I'd kind of done a lot of, you know, I was an adult then in college basically. So I'd done a lot of the juniors. I'd started into the seniors, and you know, I was so invested and putting so much time and effort into it. I just couldn't see. I was like, where is this? What am I getting back from this? Like,
Right.
where,
Right.
like, am I? What can I, you know, do with this passion that I have so much for? And I remember when I was in secondary school. So I'm probably going around in circles now, right? But I'm probably like I can't describe how, you know, not how rural it is. Like, as it's not like we were in the modern era and everything, but I never heard of Pride. I'd never heard of it. I'd never heard of Glory kickboxing. Like,
You
I didn't
didn't?
realize, I didn't know professional kickboxing existed. It
Wow.
wasn't something my coach ever talked about. And when you're that age and you're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
when you're competing for yourself, like that's all you see. You don't
Right.
like, and I didn't like watch fights, you know, as in
Hmm.
the only fights I saw were live when I was at an event, and I didn't know about any other really martial arts all that much.
Hmm.
Boxing obviously, but so when I was in school, like I was asked by a career guidance counselor, it's okay, what do you want to do for the rest of your life? You know, everyone reaches that crossroads of like, okay, you're in education, where do you go? And I just outrightly said, I was like, oh, I'd love to fight for a living. But then in that moment, in that same breath, I was like, oh, but that's not an option. And because in my like
You didn't
limited
know
knowledge, like
anything.
I
Right.
didn't know
Yeah.
anything. And that's just where that was left. It was like that was like a dream that I had then decided at 16. Like I didn't know any better. So it was just a thought. For me, it was just
Yeah,
like
yeah.
me saying this most outrageous thing. Oh my God, that would be like a lifelong dream to make a
Yeah.
career out
But
of fighting, but like
just out
that's
of,
not realistic,
yeah, just out of
you know?
curiosity, like why as a young girl did you feel like it wasn't possible at like what age were you at?
I was like 15 or
15.
16, and
Yeah.
it was just, I suppose, like my world like revolved around I was so focused on kickboxing that like the idea of other martial arts didn't really like it just wasn't something that I was introduced to. It wasn't something I was ever exposed to out of like pure circumstance. And also like we didn't have access to like, you know, US TV channels. Like we had like RT1, we'd Irish TV channels. The
Sure.
internet wasn't, you know, we
Yeah.
didn't like YouTube wasn't something we spent time on. And I
Yeah.
know this sounds like, you know, oh my God, like that you're in the like behind. It was just we were so busy down like in, you know, I suppose
Yeah.
it is like the benefits of living growing up in the countryside. Like you've other things, like
Yeah.
it was very social, very much, you know,
I
you're out
I
playing
love the
sports.
fact that it doesn't sound like it was something that was more because you were female. It was just
Oh,
you
not at
about it.
all. No. And,
So
you
yeah, so
know,
that's
that's,
great. That's
yeah.
awesome. That's
And
awesome.
especially in Ireland, and it's probably just a great point to have is, you know, we had Katie Taylor. right, who paved the way for female fighters in Ireland. And I can only say, and this, like, you know, I think it's a reflection, and I've never experienced anything outside of positivity or celebration for being an Irish female fighter.
Awesome.
Myself
That's so
personally,
great. That is so
that's
great.
myself personally. So I do know, though, I must say that my parents might have gotten a little bit more of a kickback, you know, initially in the community than, you know, I would have. And the only reason that that would have happened is it wasn't common knowledge. Like, it was unheard of. Like, there wasn't, you know, yeah, okay, like, it's because it's like when there were other options of sport that didn't include getting punched and kicked in the face, you know, like, people were just asking my parents, like, how do you feel about your daughter doing this? And they were like, well, like, she loves it, so what does it matter, you know? And it's something that my parents have, and it's really important. Like, you know, if you were to ask, like, who have I been most inspired by and most, you know, supported by, in the same breath, is my parents. And it's that support, and like, they stood up for me without, I didn't even know they were getting that kind of pushback from, you know, from friends, or even like people in general I'd never knew. And it was only when I was older they said it to me. It's like, oh, people thought we were crazy letting you do, you know, the kickboxing and everything. And like, there's a funny story. I know it's all long-winded, but like, my parents,
let's hear it.
My parents didn't know I had started MMA for the first 6 months while I was training MMA. And they only found out from a Facebook post of my amateur debut being announced.
Wow.
Because I hadn't told them, because I just knew, I was like, I had a feeling, I was like, they are not going to be impressed with this, you know. Because I was working, so I did the whole college thing. I went to the career guidance counselor, and you know, like, I'm kind of bringing it back around, but like, I went off and I had that career. I had a successful career in finance and banking, you know, from a young age. Like, I finished college at, well, I didn't finish college at 21, but I left college to go into the workforce at 21 in banking. And like, I had a permanent job in a bank with a pension, like every parent's dream for their child, you know, no student debt, no nothing like that, you know. And like, they were like, off into the sunset with you and your fancy job and everything. And then, like, off I go, throwing a spanner in the works, being like, oh, I've started MMA, like, you know. And all of a sudden they're up the country in Ireland, in this random city that they'd never probably been to. And, you know, there I was, you know, fighting in a cage in, you know, tiny little shorts and whatever. And, you know, it was just so bizarre for them, because kickboxing in Ireland, and in, like, it's in the sport. It was being considered for the Olympics recently. It got shortlisted, but like, MMA in Ireland is still not recognized as a sport. And even like, when I started, it's 7 years ago, almost 8 years ago, that I've started MMA. And back then, even, like, you know, yeah, there was Conor McGregor, but from where I was from, it was kind of unheard of and seen as quite a little bit barbaric and vicious.
Sure.
You know, so no one could understand it, you know?
Yeah.
So it was just very interesting. So my parents, like, don't get me wrong, my dad was not impressed. He was so, like, they were so, like, it's fear, like, they obviously, their daughter, like, it's something they know nothing about. They don't know what to expect. They don't even know that I've been training this, like, martial art, like, it's completely out of the blue, in these tiny little gloves, like, after going from like head guard, gloves, shin pads, everything, to
no protection.
now being no protection, nothing. And, you know, but like, in fairness, no matter how much they disagreed, and I can say this across my life in all the decisions I've made, whether they agreed with me or not, they were there, like, regardless, you know, if anything went wrong, or, you know. So they really, like, I wouldn't be in the position that I'm in. And it's not like, it's not from a financial thing. My parents, like, you know, they've worked hard their whole lives, but they gave me and my siblings what they could. And we never wanted for anything. But, you know, I think the life skills and just the, like, support they gave us was really what has led me and my siblings to be successful in whatever we've pursued. So yeah, like basically, yeah, they didn't agree with the MMA, but they've been supportive and they're my biggest fans. And they're they're invested. Like they'd be like, oh, like, do you make sure now your food? And I was like, I have a nutritionist, but I do appreciate your, like, your input here.
Right, right.
So yeah, so no, they're great. So
That's
look, and it does kind of,
wonderful that you have
yeah,
support, but they also were like, apprehensive about the whole thing. And I mean, I could see that, but it sounds like, from a very early age, you knew exactly where you wanted to be. And
yeah,
and I want to unpack that a little bit more, because this sounds like you didn't have any external influence into deciding to get to where you are today. It was something that was innately in you that really wasn't disturbed. And somehow along the way, your folks fostered in you and your siblings that kind of ability to discern for yourself. Okay, I'm gonna guide the path of my life, and right here, right now, it's in mixed martial arts and women's MMA, where I'm gonna step in the cage and have somebody come at me because I want that visceral whatever.
yeah,
Oh, I love the training. I love the whole, what it does to me psychologically, physically, spiritually. And can you speak to any of that? Because it's got to be something that you sense so deep, and it's so pure and raw that, to become a young child and then fully into, a young woman, and you went to college, you had a career, but this is what you want to do. This is
yeah, yeah.
your
And
life.
I I feel like my whole life there was an element, especially when, say, like in the professional career sense, when, say, like the finance and the bank, I always felt a little bit misunderstood. And but, like, don't get me wrong, I can completely understand why, like, because I had this successful career, went to college, did everything you're supposed to do, the textbook stuff. But, like, it was never, I just couldn't see it. I just always had this such a love for fighting. I just never felt more myself than I ever when I was training. And it was just so, it just came, it wasn't something I've never had to force myself to get out of bed to go training. I've never, I've no regrets about any of the decisions I've ever made about fighting. And I just remember there being a moment when I was, like, working, like, I left college, I was working in a job, and I was like, this can't be all there is for me. This can't be. And, like, the kickboxing had kind of come to, like, I didn't have that same excitement that I used to. And boxing was great and everything, but in a way I felt quite limited by it. And, a good friend of mine had been telling me for 3 years to go up and try MMA. And I
Mhm.
had been I had a preconceived notion at that point about MMA from the likes of, like, okay, well, if my parents are being told kickboxing is barbaric or vicious,
Mhm.
and I shouldn't be doing that. And that was what, like, the general consensus, even from, the bank and co-workers, and, like, why do you choose to do that? So then for me, MMA was like the polar opposite scale. And I think there was just one day, and I was like, like, fuck it, like, let's just give it a go. Let me just go. Like, why not? What do I have to lose by going up and trying out one session? And to
Right,
be honest, like, the rest was history. I absolutely fell in love with it.
right.
Like, even jujitsu, like, I'd never, like, this sounds really naive. I didn't know about jujitsu at that point.
Okay.
This was 2015. I
And
did
I take
2015,
it, I just want to make
2016.
a point. You're really good in jujitsu as well as kickboxing, because I'm looking at your record from amateur to pro, your wins and losses, but your wins are typically, you're basically a finisher, either by submission or TKO, or, I mean, you've had a couple of decisions, but it seems like most of them have been, you know,
Yeah, so it's very funny because my amateur debut, I got a guillotine finish. And I had been training MMA for I'd been training jujitsu for 6 months at that point.
ooh,
6 months. And it's fun. And then I did a jujitsu competition. I had another guillotine finish.
Yeah.
I've done two jiu-jitsu competitions, and that was one of them.
Yeah.
And then my first submission finish as a pro is also the guillotine. Like it's just something that I kind of a submission that I kind of grasped onto early on in my jiu-jitsu kind of career, and it just works with my game because naturally I've such high level striking
Hmm.
that like eventually they're going to shoot, they're going to have to shoot.
Right. Yeah.
I believe I it is a little bit of an ego, I suppose, but I do believe that there's very few in the world who are at my level of striking. I've
Uh-huh.
20 years experience doing this, like some
Oh,
of it's second
wow.
nature.
Wow.
I'm making, so like my striking is such a high level that like it allowed me then going into starting MMA to kind of focus on jiu-jitsu and wrestling, and then joining when I moved from where I was, Cork City, to Dublin, and joined SBG in 2017. It was like, under like coach John Kavanagh, like my grappling and my jiu-jitsu just took off from there, and I've
Imagine. Yeah.
become so much more of a well-rounded fighter now that it's been, as I look back, I can really appreciate, like, I've been quite fortunate. Like I won't say it's luck, because I went in search of these opportunities. Like I said, it's like I have this internal thing that I can't settle for being just like comfortable.
Yeah.
I like my life being a bit chaotic. I
Yeah.
like a bit of, impulse. I'm quite impulsive. So yeah, I had the job, the bank job, everything. That was grand. Okay, let's put a spanner in the works. Let's
Right.
start
Right.
MMA.
Let's add some
And then,
excitement.
yeah, and then the same thing again. I was in Cork City, settled, relationship, everything down there, and let's throw another spanner in the works, move cities, have a long distance relationship. And it's something I seem to do. Just, I don't know, is it my method of personal development? I don't know. I'm just chasing this dream that I had when I was 16, that I never believed at that point. If you went back and put like a hand on my shoulder, like talking to that teacher when I was 16, and said, like, you can do it, you're doing it, like it's happening.
Right.
I could never in a million years have thought I'd be in the position I'm in.
Wow, that's wonderful. I'm wondering that teacher that you spoke to and you were saying that would be your dream, choice of career. What was the reaction?
So like it was kind of a little bit, I suppose, like I think he kind of laughed at me. He was an old school Irish teacher. He's
Yeah,
big into
yeah.
Gaelic football, so one of the Irish sports, and he's
Uh-huh.
actually he's well renowned in his and I think, to be honest, if I had come up with a rational route, a
Uh-huh.
plan, if I'd come up with a rational plan to him, I think he would have backed me 100%. 100%. He was a very, very, I had a lot of positive experiences with like teachers who believed in me, and like, they always made allowances while I was kickboxing and everything. Don't get me wrong, I drove them absolutely mental. Like I made life very difficult for them at times, but I can't say it was anything external that put a block there. I think it was a little bit of ignorance,
Uh-huh.
that I didn't know. I didn't, a little bit of naivety.
Sure.
And, then in my brain, I was like, okay, what's the next best thing to that? So we kind of explored me potentially, you
Hmm.
know, going into sports, like PE teaching, like being a teacher. And that's something actually that I was kind of beginning to pursue. So even me ending up working in the bank wasn't planned, it was
Hmm.
pure accident, out of circumstance. I wanted to be a teacher. And it was so funny. I wanted to teach because I love maths. I studied mathematics and the Irish
Uh-huh.
language in college.
Uh-huh.
And I was always so angry about the way maths was taught and how people were giving out about maths. And I was like, I feel like I could teach this to my friends so much better than it's being taught to us, you know? So
Wow,
it was,
that's
I
great.
was
Yeah.
quite rebellious. I was
Yeah.
quite rebellious as a child. And I was
Uh-huh.
very much anti kind of authority, and,
Uh-huh.
thought I knew better. I always
Right.
thought I knew better. But over the years, I look back and, like I went to a very small school. There was 20 students in my class, my year. There was 100 students in the whole school, and it was spoken through like completely through the Irish. My whole education from when I was like I suppose what age was I? 4 or 5 up until the age of 17 was purely through the Irish language, which isn't widely spoken in Ireland
Right,
anymore.
right.
So it was quite a small school, but like, I think it really built up, I had the support system there more so than if I'd been in a big school, just me and my personality, I think I would have gotten lost because they wouldn't have had the time for me that my teachers did to help me focus. That was a big problem I had. And I think the reason I love MMA and martial arts so much, it was the one thing that I didn't have to force myself to focus on.
Right.
There was nothing distracting
Effortless.
me from it.
Yeah.
It was so effortless that it was all I wanted. It was
Yeah.
all I that got me excited, and luckily I still feel the exact same today. Maybe like at that point it was about kickboxing, whereas now
Oh.
it's about MMA as a whole.
Mhm.
I still love going into the gym every single day of the week, and I'm excited to learn new stuff. I'm curious. I
Mhm.
like trying new things and sparring. Sometimes probably not the
Mhm.
best things to be trying, but
Yeah.
no, I still have the same love as me, that 16-year-old, thinking about it.
Then, yeah, you're always learning something new when you're in that martial arts realm, like whether it's a new way to punch or
Yeah.
when to punch, the strategy behind it. There's so many caveats to it. Like even jujitsu, they refer to it as a chess match when you're working with another opponent. What would you say is your favorite thing about like training? Like if you broke it down into different, categories of when you go into the gym and you're training, is it strategy? Is it keeping your body physically fit? Is it the action between you and your opponent, or is it just I can't decide?
Yeah. So I think my favorite, and it happens quite regularly. I'm a bit of I suppose yeah, like I said, impulsive. So I do a lot of things sometimes out of pure instinct, like out of pure
Yeah.
instinct. And I love when, say, I've learned a technique, say, from one of my coaches, and they said, like, and I love when it fits my style, when something feels
Yeah.
very natural. And
Yeah.
then the moment that I pull it off in live rounds,
And you catch it
in
the first time, like
so
I
that first
actually
time, it's
did
like
it. And it was
it
like, and I didn't
is
think about it. It
about
just,
it. Yeah, when
that
it
is,
becomes your go-to or subconscious, then
yeah.
I'm like, wow, like that's progress to me, and that's like the progress that like
And
really
it's
fuels me.
so
It
visceral.
Yeah, and I like my biggest
Wow.
critic, biggest critic, and my biggest opposition, my biggest opponent is myself,
Right.
because I'm so hard on myself. I get so frustrated with myself. Like I, when I get like, if I make a mistake in training, I'm generally quite good. I'm not too hard on myself if it happens once.
Yeah.
But if it's a mistake that reoccurs or that I haven't addressed, then I start getting very annoyed with myself. And it does take, John had a conversation with me recently, and he made me stop and think. I was saying how something I did was really bad, and he was like, no, he's like, watch how you speak to yourself. He's like, watch how, like, we need to be kinder to ourselves, because if I'm my biggest opponent, then in the middle of a fight, if I'm getting frustrated or in a
Yeah.
spar, like, he made such a good point. He was like, you're fighting yourself first and then your opponent. He was like, why, like, I'm
Why
making
have
my
that
job.
middle person in there?
Yeah. So I think I am my biggest challenge, dealing with, my own, you
Mhm.
know, like because it is like, it's personal, like I suppose my own, what, like you say in running and everything, people go for personal best or whatever.
Right.
So
Right.
like my equivalent of that is like, I want to see progress. I want to see myself, doing better and being better. So, but also I do need to be a bit nicer to myself, because like change doesn't happen overnight. You don't learn stuff overnight. It's time and trusting in the process. All those things that you hear, like some of the great like MMA fighters and coaches talk about. It's all so true. And I think when you start applying it and just being consistent, consistency is everything. So if I'm consistently getting better, then that's all I want, and that's what kind of spurs me on. And then you see, it might feel like a plateau for a certain stage, but then when you see the jump, and you get that like outside reassurance from your coaches, that really is what drives me on. Just getting better. And
speaking to that, can you think of any time where you really noticed in your training or in anything in your life where you noticed that kind of, I'm really like not getting something, or you were down on yourself, or you had something external happen, maybe one of your losses in a fight, and then you had to kind of get that mindset, or whatever it was, the training, whatever it was, the mental talk to overcome, and how did you kind of tackle that?
Yeah, so the first thought would have been a loss, but now that I think about it, I actually had something that I think really, really I found so difficult. And honestly, it was one of the hardest things to go through, and it was like inactivity. So I turned pro in September 2019, and that was my first professional fight, and I lost. It was a really short notice fight, and not making that excuse. It was a short notice fight. I was inexperienced, and I fought over Montreal, and I got beaten by a better fighter. And I just remember coming back and wanting to be like, okay, I'm ready to get better. Let's go. And then all of a sudden, COVID-19 happened. There were no MMA shows, and I was just like, we were still able to train as professional athletes, and I had a period of 18 months of inactivity, and I had a fight, and then I think going through those 18 months and still showing up every day, believing that the right opportunity would come up, believing that like it would happen, and just staying the course, and listening to my coaches and my teammates, it really has just lined me up to kind of be able to anything you can throw at me, I feel like I could handle, because say I had another fight in that period of time, I won, great fight, brilliant, and then I was kind of left in limbo again. I wasn't signed with any promotion. There were still some restrictions, and I don't know what it was. I was like, I was still working at that stage full time and training, and do you know what? I had to do a lot of self-reflection, being like, okay, like you've made all these sacrifices, like it's like you're either going all in on this career or you're not. You can't do 50-50. It's not going to work.
Interesting.
I was 20.
Wow.
I was 20. I was 26 or 27. I can't remember. And I just, like I was holding on to that security that full-time job gave me. Oh my God, I'm going to have a pension, whatever. And I think having to let that go of everything, like the plan B, letting that go. And
go after your dream.
Go after my dream, and I remember I rang my parents and I was like, oh, I quit my job. And they were like, what? And I was like, no, remember I told you I was going to quit my job. I was like, I quit it. And they were like, we thought you were joking. And I was like, no, I've done it. And so I didn't work from August of when was that, 2021 or 2020? Anyways, I didn't work for like a long time. And I still had no contract for the promotion.
Almost 2 years.
6 months. 6 months later, I fought for Combate. It wasn't, sorry, 6 months later, I signed with Combate. 9 months I think it was even longer, 9 months later. But
Yeah,
I quit
I'm
my
looking
job
at
with,
it. Your next fight would have been, you had 2019, a loss against, what is it, Karine
yeah.
Boys, and then it was June 2021 before your next fight where you had the win.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah, yeah. And then
like,
I think there was a gap. There was a gap again until I think from there
yeah, to
until
2022. It was the whole year.
2022. Yeah, yeah. So there was a lot of inactivity. And I think just making those big decisions, because they were big decisions and they were scary decisions. And, but to be honest, don't get me wrong, right? Fighting at the end of the day, it's prize fighting. There's scary things, there's big consequences. But like throughout my life, in my career in finance, I'm sorry, there are scarier things in life than standing in front of someone in a cage. So I
Yeah.
think if you can overcome some of those things and just what you see in the world, and if you actually put it in perspective,
Mm-hmm.
then there's very little, you know, as in, don't get me wrong, I have nerves. I
Mm-hmm.
have nerves when I go into the cage, but
Sure.
like, you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, like win or lose, like I'm allowing myself, I found a way to wake up and do my dream job
But
every day,
still alive too.
you
Like,
know, and feel like, so like I'm happy, I'm content,
yeah.
like, you know, until the day that's taken away from me. And like, and that's something you have to think about as well. Like the day I finish fighting,
Well, it's
like what's the
finite
next
too.
passion?
It's a
What's the next?
finite, yeah, it's a
Yeah, it's
finite
finite because
period of time that you can actually do that. I mean, most athletes, I mean, if they get into their 40s, they're really something going on there for them to get into their 40s doing this. You're still in
I'm 28.
20s,
I'm
28.
28. Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, you could have, but most
My plan is
employers,
like 6, 7 years at least. You know, I can see
yeah.
myself like late 30s, 100. Like I've touched wood over the course of my career, had limited injuries, and I look after my body. So why shouldn't I
Right.
have a career as long as that?
Right.
And you know, it's kind of about management as well, like managing, you know, like it'll you know, I'm not, that's not something I'm worried about right now, you know.
Mhm.
And but I am setting myself up for, like, I'm just thinking about, like, Jesus, like the our life expectancy is going up. So I've actually found a bit of a passion in, like, I think my nutritionist Tristan Kennedy is an
Mhm.
absolute genius. So he works
Mhm.
with Conor McGregor, and
Mhm.
the stuff he knows, and just what I've learned from him just by, like, him looking after my nutrition is phenomenal. And I found a little bit of a passion, something I feel like I could pursue. Like I would love to be able to do what he does for me for other athletes. And you know, whether that's to specifically work with female athletes, because obviously there's a lot less, like
It's
there's
it's
still
got to be
research
different,
done.
right? It's got to be
It's
different.
going to be different. I think MMA is a bit of ahead of the curve there with the
Mhm.
level of research that the highest level nutritionists in the industry have done research into how it affects women differently to men.
Mhm.
But I think that would be something, you know, that I would find really interesting, and I would find very fulfilling to pursue in the future. But
Excellent.
that's a side thing, something I can work on
Yeah.
in the side. But for me at the moment, like, you know, I'm so excited for next Friday. You know, this is like, it's just been a steady, it hasn't been easy. You know, I haven't taken easy fights, I've had really hard fights. You know, I've had to kind of endure periods of inactivity, I've had to fight with injuries. You know, I this is, thank God, like one of the first fights in a long time where I'm coming into it with no injuries, thank
Nice.
God. And
Great.
you know, I'm coming in, like, I think every fight, you know, I say it to my, like, if I'm not coming into every fight like in the best physical condition I've ever been in, like, I can safely say I'm
Mhm.
in the best shape of my life right now. And I want to be able to say that with every fight, because, you know, at the end of the day, you know, your next fight is the biggest fight of your career,
Yep.
until it isn't.
Right.
Until it isn't.
Right.
Until, you know,
The
the
day
sun shines
after.
the next morning, the day after, you
Yeah.
celebrate. Like, it's like my coach says it, he's a book written about it, like win or learn and all that. But even, you know, don't celebrate your wins too much, don't, you know, dwell on your losses too much. And
Right.
I think
Yeah.
it's a great thing to have, because it just means that, like, you show up to the gym the next day, the next week, and you just get better, and
Absolutely.
it's something that kind of, seeing that around me and training in that kind of atmosphere in the gym has definitely helped me, sustain, because it has to be sustainable. It has to be sustainable when, like, I've already had a
Yeah.
career in mixed martial arts for 20 years. I've already had an MMA career for the last 7 or 8 years, and I'm going to have it for another 6 or 7. So I need to be able to sustain what I'm doing. I need to be able to enjoy it. So,
Yeah.
and continue to. So I think I found a really good balance there, and I'm surrounded by amazing people who make, it's not a job, it's a
Yeah.
passion. So
Well, you had I mean, prior to signing on with Invicta FC, you must have had a pretty good contract going with Combat Global, because they looked like they tried to keep you pretty busy
they
during
did. They were
2022.
great. They were great.
And I mean, it looks like you had 3 fights during that time. And then April of this year, that was the last one. And now Invicta has you've captured their eye. And now, do you have just this one fight contract with Invicta, or will
No,
be
so I
any
have
more?
a multi-fight contract with Invicta, so I'm really
Nice.
excited, like, to have a few fights with
Excellent.
them. But I also do have, like, they've been, Invicta, I think you can see it from a lot of the past champions, the past fighters. Like,
Mhm.
they're great. Like, if they can't get you on the next card or whatever, they allow you to fight for other promotions. So I want to be
That's
like,
so awesome that
it's
Shannon
so,
still keeps
she's
that
amazing.
going
Yeah.
to allow you
Yeah.
to go and do your thing. That's
Yeah. It
really,
just
that is
allows that bit of,
unheard of. And in
it
most
is,
other promotions,
it is,
they get
it
you
is.
and forget it. You can't fight for anybody else.
This is it. Like, I think it's having that, like, sense of, I think it's because, like, Invicta's the level, Invicta's like, okay, like, it's Invicta, and then where's next? It's like the pinnacle of the sport. You're in, like, the pathways to the
Yeah,
UFC. So
right.
I think, by having that stance, like, you can hold Invicta up on this, pedestal, and,
Absolutely.
allowing, female MMA to take a spotlight, and, like, having it in somewhere as monumental as Boston, I think it's going to be a really special event. You've two Irish fighters, myself and my
Yeah.
teammate Danny McCormack. Like, she's fighting for the strawweight belt,
Nice.
and my fight is arguably like a number one contender spot. I'm
Right.
fighting I'm
Exactly.
fighting Kristina Williams. She fought for the
Yeah.
belt in her last fight, and
Yeah.
it's, I think, everything lines up. I think if you line yourself up for the opportunities that are given to you, then you're going to do well in this sport. So, like, Kristina wasn't my original opponent. I had another opponent who got injured,
Ah,
and I was given the option of two different girls, and I chose Kristina because, obviously, I believe, like, I'm the
well,
better
your
fighter, and
ranking
I'm
will
going to.
change. You beat her.
This is it. I when I beat her, I don't know. I just see, like, I put myself in this position with the amount
Yeah,
of training I've done, and I've never turned down, an opponent within my
I
weight
love
class.
that attitude. That's awesome.
And the training, I train all year round. I don't just train for my fight
Your
camps.
fight.
I live in Dublin. I'm in the gym every single day. So if I'm offered, if they offered me a title fight, against, like, it is the number one contender in the flyweight division, like, that's who I'm fighting, then, like, I'm going to take that with open arms, because, like, that's only going to bring me closer to inevitably where I want to be. I want to have Invicta Gold strapped around my waist. I want
How
to,
wonderful would that
be
be?
signed to the UFC. I have these goals, and, when they're just beyond the horizon. I just need to, like, keep doing what I've been doing.
Yeah.
Keep staying true to my decisions, and, that dream that I had at 16. Let's keep going towards that.
So when you started training with in mixed martial arts, I mean, did you watch any of the fights in Invicta? Did you know about Ronda Rousey? Did you know about, like, Gina Carano at all? Did they have any sort of
So
influence over you when you were, just kind of starting to? I mean, Gina was a
so
big,
the
kickboxer. She fought in Thailand, and
Yeah, no, I didn't know any of them.
you didn't know any of them.
The
Wow, that's
first
so
MMA, the first MMA fight I watched was Conor McGregor versus Diego Brandao. And this was in a pub, a rural pub
Yeah.
down in Ireland, on a weekend. I was really
Oh.
young, and it was like, so it's obviously, I can't remember where it was, like, it's a different hour of the day and everything. Like, it was just
Were
yeah,
your folks
that was
with
my
you?
introduction. That
Were
was
your
my
folks?
introduction.
Were your folks with you?
No, no, no. I
You
was with my
were
friends.
off
I was
on
with my
your
friends.
own, going to some bar or whatever
Yeah,
to watch a fight. At how
yeah.
old?
But like, when I was in college, Conor McGregor had just been signed to the UFC. I think it was in 2013.
Yeah.
He was in a nightclub that I was in with my friends, and he was in the VIP area. He was doing meet and greets.
Wow.
And my friends, like, they were like, "Do you do kickboxing? Do you want to get a photo with this guy?" And I was like, "I don't know who that is. I didn't know MMA. I didn't
Oh,
know
wow.
MMA." And then, right, how funny is it? A couple of years later,
So
I'm
amazing.
like, I see him on the TV. I see him on the TV, and I'm like,
That's the
he was
guy.
in the nightclub. I was
That's
like, that's
the
the
guy.
guy. That was the guy. So,
Wow.
yeah,
And do
no,
you
it was.
train with him now sometimes at
So
all?
he's, yeah, Connor's in the gym the odd time,
Go figure.
and
Wow. You
but
are
obviously
just
if he ever sees this interview, like, sorry, Connor. But no, and what he's done for the sport in Ireland has been phenomenal. It's just blown up. You see, even the systems that they have in place now with the IMAFs, the
yeah,
amateurs, the kids,
yeah.
the novices coming up. It's really, really blown up. And I think, once it's recognized in Ireland as a sport, I think it will just go from level to level. It will just be
Oh,
amazing.
definitely, definitely. Wow. So, I mean, I'm actually surprised that you really were very sheltered and didn't know much about what was going on in mixed martial arts and just came up and along, and here you are, and you're just like, I mean, I know you've worked hard to get here, but you're just here and you just have no like of nothing that kind of
That's the story of my life. So if
open
that's the
doors all along the
yeah
way so you could even be
yeah
here. But I think it's
yeah
wonderful that it just kind of occurred, and there's no stigma with it for you
yeah.
as there was
Do you
for
know
other
one thing?
women coming up, being a
Yeah,
woman
no,
and
there
fighting in
wasn't.
this.
Being a woman was never,
Yeah.
and even in kickboxing, I've only ever felt in Ireland and abroad as a female fighter. And I think it maybe it is something unique to MMA, but I feel like female fighters are celebrated more in MMA than in any other sport, arguably. In combat sports, especially
Yeah.
in Ireland, especially,
Yeah.
I've never received anything but like positive support from people, and it's an exciting time to be a female MMA fighter, in Ireland, and in fighting in the States, and I think you see the attention Invicta gets. It's phenomenal. So it
Right.
is. I think it's a really exciting time to be a
A
female
woman in
fighter in MMA,
sports. Yeah,
a
a
woman
woman
in
in
sport. Yeah.
sports. Yeah. So do you one of my one of the last questions I want to have with you about, like, how do you see young girls and maybe you influencing young girls coming up, or how it's changed the mainstream even from when you came up, and you're seeing young girls come up who may have interest in the sport and are viewing you like, oh wow, she's my hero, she's up there and I want to be like her, and who is now probably saying, I want to be a fighter and I can do it.
Yeah, yeah.
you know
Well, I think, not even just for little girls, but for like young kids in general. Like,
yeah, I love
that
that.
whole thing of caring what other people, caring what other people think. Nobody's thinking about you. People are thinking about themselves. So
Right.
you do you. Like, don't care about what other people think. Don't look for, if you get outside validation, great. But like, don't expect it, because for the majority of the time people are more focused on themselves. So you do you do what makes you happy. You pursue your dreams, and don't take anyone putting you down or saying you can't do it as an option.
I love that. That's great advice. And last but not least, before I let you go, any words for, Kristina Williams, or how you think that that's going to go? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
or like, how do you perceive, like, what's your kind of like feel for how, you're going to enter? I know you're not going to give your fight plan away, but a little bit about like, okay, I watch her. She's a great fighter. Just a little of what.
Yeah, no, she's a great fighter. No,
Yeah.
she is, and she's had a great career. And her last fight was great. She put up it was a close fight, but like I think for Kristina, just know like I chose this. I chose this. I like the she's a good fighter. She's well rounded everywhere. I just think that like I am such a well rounded mixed martial artist, and the work I've been putting in, and there's it's inevitable. I'm going to win. I don't see a scenario where I don't. If I show up, if Dee Begley shows up, in all her form on Friday night, when I show up on Friday night in my form, I'm going to get my hand raised. But like that, at the end of the day, like there's no bad blood here. It's just about me achieving my goals and getting to where I want to be. And at the moment, like Kristina Williams is in the way. So that's all I have to say. It's a win here puts me in line for the title, and that's what's in my that's on my horizon.
Awesome. And do you have any shout outs that you'd like to give to any of your sponsors or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'd love to thank Cape Cod Irish Village over in Massachusetts. They've come on board as a sponsor. Johan Seafood here in Ireland have come aboard, like all my sponsors, and to my coaches, to my management. Barry has done a lot of work coming up to this one. To Shannon and the team in Invicta, they've just made everything very easy. They've been very helpful. And, just to my teammates and everyone who's been a part of my fight camp, to my coaches, John and Dave, who are coming over to corner me. Like it's also about doing them justice, the work, the time they put into me over the year. Just showing up and putting on a performance for everyone who's supported my career to date. So yeah, just thank you to everyone, and thank you as well for having me on. It's been lovely chatting to you.
So delighted to have you. It's really been a pleasure learning more about you as a person outside of mixed martial arts. What inspired you? I think people will get a kick out of listening to your stories, and I wish you the best next Friday. I look forward to seeing you. Hopefully I can get a picture with you when I see you.
Yeah, brilliant. No, it'd be great to see you there.
Yeah. I'm trying to see if I can get a press pass or something, and see if I can get behind and see some of the fighters, maybe beforehand or whatever, warming up and what have you. And I can check in with you. Really been a pleasure. Hang on for a second, but hey, wasn't that a great interview? I'd like to thank Dee Begley for coming onto the show last minute, and we wish her much success in her future career as an MMA fighter, and next week too in Boston. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review, because it helps people find the show. And on the review, mention Dee Begley and how she might have inspired or motivated you. And if you liked what you heard today and are eager to hear more, never miss an episode from Evolve WMMA by remembering to subscribe or download on iTunes, or you can find us on Podomatic and Spotify at Evolve Women's MMA. Or if you prefer to watch, you can find a new episode on YouTube at Evolve Women's MMA. And go ahead and check out our website at www.evolvewmma.com. And lastly, if nothing else, you can simply follow us at facebook.com/I love WMMA. This is Shelley Devine. Until next time, thanks for listening.